Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all, and welcome to RAID First Panel Discussion. While differences in social, cultural, and political norms exist and are reflected in regulatory frameworks, these differences are much smaller than the common and global challenges we are facing, as we just heard from the first speakers this morning. In the field of AI and new technologies, it is essential to foster a better understanding of the risks and opportunities of this rapidly growing sector. With the EU GDPR and the draft EU AI Act, China's own personal information protection law and new AI regulatory framework, or the forthcoming AI Bill of Rights due to be released by the US Office of Science and Technology Policy in the coming weeks, it is crucial to provide a forum for dialogue such as RAID does and assess the potential for international alignment on the fundamentals of AI regulation. In this regard, there are some positive signs, such as the 2019 G20 AI principles, themselves drawn from the OECD recommendation on AI, or even more recently, the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, adopted by all 193 UNESCO member states. So to kick off the conference this morning, our first panel will have the task to tackle global perspectives on creating balance in a precarious world. And for this, I'm honored to introduce our distinguished speakers. Jean-Pierre Raffarin is former Prime Minister of France, honorary member of the European Parliament, and chairman of the Fondation, Prospective and Innovation. Jean-Pierre Raffarin is a French special representative for China and chairman of France-China Committee Annual Forum. He is also chairman of the Fondation Leaders for Peace. Wojciech Wiewiórowski is the European Data Protection Supervisor. Arvind Gupta is the president of the Digital India Foundation, and Lebin is the chairman of the Chinese Academy of Sciences Venture Capital and founding director of the China Internet Development Foundation. Last but not least, my name is Karine Caunes, and it will be my pleasure to moderate this panel this morning. I'm the Global Program Director of the Center for AI and Digital Policy, CIDF, which aims to promote a better society, more fair, more just, and more accountable, a world where technology promotes broad social inclusion based on fundamental rights, democratic institutions, and the rule of law. And relevant to our discussion this morning, I would like to mention that we recently published the second edition of the AI and Democratic Values Index, the first and only global index assessing the AI policies of 50 countries worldwide, in the hope that we indeed can find some common values and, above all, common direction in the development of AI regulation and new technology regulation. Lastly, I would like to remind the audience that you can ask questions online through Hopin. And without further ado, I will give the floor to our first speaker this morning, Mr. Jean-Pierre Raffarin. Mr. Jean-Pierre Raffarin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to welcome the second edition of RAID after the one held on October 12, 2021, which offers the opportunity to have a trilateral exchange on what has become one of the major issues facing the world, the generation, storage, processing, and exploitation of data. I say ni hao to my friends and bonjour à tous. I would like to have a special word for my friend Lebin, Mr. Cash, my old friend. Over the years, the situation, the question of how to regulate the internet and its potential has become more and more pressing. Technological advances driven by the increased need for communication in COVID time are becoming faster and deeper, while tensions are becoming stronger and stronger. The war of Ukraine adds new tension, of course, to all those that have been accumulated in recent years. I will speak French right now. Je me félicite donc qu'en cette période de transition et de troubles avec de fortes tensions, la Fondation Prospective et Innovation et le groupe britannique Cavendish, avec le soutien d'Allen & Overy, aient pu organiser ce webinaire, cette discussion qui rassemble de hautes personnalités d'Europe, de Chine, d'Inde, des États-Unis et du Canada. Pas moins de 40 intervenants pour ces échanges qui devront durer toute la journée et qui seront suivis par des centaines de participations et de participants. Le monde aujourd'hui se fragmente alors que les problèmes sont globaux, universels. Le multilatéralisme ne se porte pas très bien alors qu'il est la seule manière d'inclure les parties prenantes aux grands problèmes contemporains. Le monde se nationalise, voire se régionalise, alors que l'on sait que le climat, la santé, le respect d'autrui et de ses libertés, la prospérité et le rattrapage économique des plus pauvres ne peuvent recevoir de solution que grâce à un travail commun. Dialoguer n'est pas approuvé, évidemment, mais une manière de mieux connaître l'autre, de mieux faire connaître aussi son point de vue et ses intérêts. Les applications découlant des nouvelles technologies font partie intégrante de ce besoin de position qui ne peuvent être qu'un alliage de compétition et de collaboration. Ainsi va le monde, même entre amis, nous avons besoin de compétition, mais aussi de coopération. Internet a d'abord voulu être un outil de liberté, de libre communication entre individus, à faible coût pour l'utilisateur bien sûr, et favorisant l'épanouissement de chacun. Mais assez rapidement on a pu constater qu'à côté de ses vertus, qu'il faut naturellement sauvegarder, l'Internet pouvait être aussi un instrument d'atteinte aux libertés, de création d'oligopoles avec un tout petit nombre d'acteurs, de dévoyer les règles de la concurrence économique et ainsi d'infléchir les comportements des individus et même le destin des États. Ce sont là des principes de base élémentaires, mais qui justifient pleinement les régulations à mettre en place. Nous avons sur ce point naturellement à rechercher le bon équilibre dans la régulation et ce n'est pas facile à trouver. Une course de vitesse s'est instaurée entre régulateurs et opérateurs. Ceux-ci ayant agilité et puis des moyens financiers considérables, alors que les premiers doivent respecter des procédures, des principes et être équipés pour anticiper et réagir très très vite. La régulation ne peut s'exercer dans le seul cadre, même les nouvelles technologies ignorent les frontières et parfois les lois et les règlements. Là également, les défis sont redoutables. Seule la coopération internationale se révèle être le cadre approprié. Et toutes les tables rondes qui sont organisées dans cette journée en seront, j'en suis sûr, l'illustration, aussi bien sur le plan financier, culturel, commercial ou en matière d'investissement. Pour que cette coopération internationale soit effective, même si elle est imparfaite, nous le savons, cette coopération a besoin d'un minimum de confiance et d'intérêt partagé, de transparence, de prise en compte des ressemblances et des différences entre les valeurs, mais aussi les intérêts des sociétés. La France a compris que le cadre européen, pour elle, est le mieux approprié pour bâtir une régulation qui reprend nos valeurs et nos intérêts nationaux. Édiction de règles et mise en place de moyens de les faire respecter, ce qui passe aussi, évidemment, par des infrastructures technologiques, matérielles, de stockage, des données, bien sûr, et de production aussi des composants essentiels. En 2 ans, l'Europe a changé de rythme, de logiciel, je dirais, et a pris un certain nombre de textes qui la placent en bonne position pour protéger ses citoyens et ses entreprises, mais aussi pour dialoguer avec les autres nations dans cet esprit de souveraineté ouverte, de souveraineté solidaire. Nous ne croyons pas à la souveraineté intégrale, mais à des souverainetés de coopération qui est au fond la marque de fabrique de ce que l'Europe défend, une souveraineté donc qui reste très ouverte, mais avec des coopérations. J'aurai certainement l'occasion de revenir sur ces sujets au cours de cette table ronde qui nous rassemble et je suis heureux de pouvoir y participer et j'en félicite tous les organisateurs et les participants. Salut amical à mes collègues panélistes. C'est à vous.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Lebin. Lebin, the floor is yours.
Hi. Hello to dear Mr. Prime Minister Raffarin. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure to follow Prime Minister Raffarin. And by this chance, I would like to present 2 points about the topic. And the first, why is the world precarious right now? I would like to begin with a story. In the final years of the Cold War, during a private walk with only Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev, Reagan began with a question: if planet Earth were invaded by hostile machines, how would the Soviet Union and the United States respond? Now the machines are coming in the forms of climate change, ongoing pandemic, and the risk of the future outbreaks and other things. And how should we create balance when we are facing these threats? Making use of the international institutions to implement effective mechanisms, for example, standardizing carbon assessment standards on companies to limit their carbon footprints through the UN, and managing the development of alternative biofuels such as green methanol through the IEA. As you know, I and my team have raised a new concept of liquid sunshine, which is the green methanol. The green methanol is use the green electricity and then to synthesize the carbon and the water into the methanol. And then establishing international IVD lab networks to monitor contagious disease through World Health Organization, WHO. That's my first point. My second point, against the backdrop, digital technology continues to accelerate into all areas of life, into globalization. On one hand, data is a new kind of precious resource in our modern world. In every large countries, such as China or the United States, the data of its millions of citizens is an invaluable resource that cannot be replicated, just as some countries are traditionally blessed with many natural resources. We are now seeing a new type of country that is blessed with a large population, and therefore a lot of data. This data can be therefore seen as a new type of natural resource. On the other hand, data serves as a very useful tool for all aspects of society. With the advent machine learning, AI, and other technologies that use data has the potential to improve all aspects of society, from medicine to energy. Considering the revolutionary applications, we, the people of the world, should have the right to be able to access and use data. However, at the same time, we should uphold the shared responsibility of using data wisely and for good purposes, hence lead for the proper regulation. And I also would like to conclude my speech for telling a story of 5 apples I ever mentioned somewhere else. The first number 1 apple of Eden, the number 2 apple of Isaac Newton, the number 3 apple of Alan Turing, the number 4 apple Steve Jobs. Now we are approaching the 5th apple. Well, the machine is going to be alive through digitalization. The life is going to be a machine through digitalization. So that's my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much to give us the evolution of the different apples and recent opportunities of new technologies. So now, without further ado, we'll see a European perspective with Wojciech Wiewiórowski. Wojciech, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever we see each other in the world. Well, the world, which of course is the global village, but which at the same time shows some differences between the areas that we are in and the societies that we are from. Trying to discuss about new technologies and their impact on our life, we have to bear in mind that there is nothing like the national use of technologies. There is nothing like the regional use of different services online. We have to remember that one of the lessons which we learned during the COVID time is that if we can stop the people on the borders, if we can stop the goods on the borders, we cannot stop the data on the borders. So we have to think about global cooperation. We have to think about the global discussion about the values that we want to keep, and what we call the European approach to new technologies, to new online services, to new electronic or rather digital world is based on the values that the European Union, Council of Europe, has established at last 30 years since the data protection and privacy has been recognized as one of the fundamental rights in Europe. Of course, I'm biased as the Data Protection Commissioner, looking at this from the point of view of the person dealing with the privacy, the person who often is called the Data Protection Supervisor. That's the official name of my position. But we have to remember that we are not protecting the data. This is not the data what we want to keep safe. We are protecting the people who are over this data. And the people are the most important. That's why I don't like the metaphor of data being the fuel of the new economy, because this is not a commodity. This is an information about me, about you, about our families, our friends, and our enemies. And we have to bear in mind that sharing of that is not necessarily caring about the people that the data is describing. Of course, I think about the personal data, but we know that more and more information resources are somehow connected with the persons. So even if we think about artificial intelligence, whatever this notion may mean, we are absolutely aware of the fact that 90% of users, 90% of technologies also that are dealing with the artificial intelligence algorithms, or once again, however we will call these solutions, 90% of them are absolutely safe and do not create any problems from the privacy and data protection point of view. while at the same time, these 10% that are the tips of the iceberg are usually the ones which are visible by the data protection supervisors. So let me just point one main concern, or rather the way that we address these concerns toward the new technologies. We are not against technologies. We are not against the development of the technologies. But there are certain uses of these technologies which might create the problems either on the very spot or the more general problems for the society. And let me stay with the second part and use the example of two solutions which the European Artificial Intelligence Act is trying to touch, remembering about the rules going out from the General Data Protection Regulation and trying to think about the in employment of the new technologies, or rather in introduction of the new technologies in the society. The first one of them is the one that the data protection authorities were very vocal about, which is the remote biometrics used for in the identification purposes, and the second one is the social scoring. So remote biometric used for the identification seems to be something absolutely normal. In many countries, it's in often use. We are also ready to use it in the places where we are crossing the borders, when we are accessing the buildings of the special importance. And we do not have the problem with the verification of the identification of the person with the biometric tools. The problem starts where this remote biometric is started to use in the publicly accessible areas in order to recognize everybody around. Then we have the question, what should be the rule and what should be the exception? And we think that these uses, the uses in the publicly accessible areas, shall be generally banned, while some exceptional uses may be allowed for the strictly limited purposes. It's, however, much more difficult with social scoring, which has a very bad reputation among the human rights movements, among the regulators in Europe. And since we understand the pros of this kind of technologies, we think that their use should be strictly limited to the situations where the values that we are defending are not on stake. And there's no matter if it is done by the private entities or by the state. The state shall be obliged the same way to keep the privacy of the people in their mind. Of course, these privacy issues are only the part, maybe even a small part of the discussion about the new technologies and the regulation. But this is the part where we are somehow different one from another. The US and Europe, coming from the same roots, establish different regulatory frameworks. China is proposing right now to join to this group of the countries which have the established rules, but we are not hiding the fact that the very cultural background and the very societal background of the use of these technologies is much different. And while we are happy of the activities of the OECD and UNESCO in the field of the ethical rules for artificial intelligence, I don't try to hide the fact that the acceptance of some of these rules by each and every country which belongs to UNESCO does not say to us that in all of these countries these rules will be understood the same way. So let's talk about the values, but let's also remember that we are sometimes recognizing them differently, and we explain them differently to ourselves. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to take part in the discussion about the subject.
Thank you very much, Wojciech, for your presentation of a European perspective. Let's remind to our audience that actually the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI has banned social scoring, and we will see in which ways it will be implemented in different countries. So now, without further ado, we will get an Indian perspective thanks to Arvind Gupta. And further, I would like to remind the audience that you can ask questions in the Q&A on hoping. Thank you. Arvind, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. And if I sound a little coarse because I'm under the weather, so excuse me for that. But I'm so glad to be here with the former Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, a representative from China, a representative, the Data Commissioner Wojciech from European Union, and of course representing the biggest democracy in the world, myself from India. So this really blends what I'm going to talk about today. Uh, let me first start by actually just what I heard Commissioner Wojciech talk about, that data is not the key resource. I'll probably disagree with that, and I'll start with explaining why. So we are living in what is the fourth industrial revolution, right? And in the fourth industrial revolution, the three key resources are data, algorithms, and computing power. Computing power has become a commodity. Today, because of Moore's law, computing power is becoming cheaper and cheaper, not every 18 months, but probably every 9 to 12 months. Um, Data is everywhere. We are generating data by trillions and billions of data points as we are speaking right now. Our smartphones are leaving data points. Content is, I'm not even talking about content, I'm just focusing on the data that is core to algorithms. And then the third is AI, the algorithms, the algorithmic power, people who are writing those. Now, the combination of the three has the potential to transform the way fourth industrial revolution and societies and governments and businesses use to transform our lives. Having said that, uh, the core model, the core resource that's going in, apart from the computing power, which is the engine, which is or the infrastructure, and the brain is the AI. The core input that is going in is data. I agree with Commissioner Wojciech. It's not oil. It's actually a key resource which keeps getting harnessed again and again in different shapes and formats by different algorithms, and it's the most shareable commodity, unlike oil, because oil gets used once, it's done, whereas data is getting reused multiple times. Now, uh, and that's where the concerns arise, because whether it's personal data or not personal data, or secure data, we have to understand that there is going to be difference in the models every country adopts, and data definitely is borderless, sitting anywhere in the world. uh, Prime Minister referred to internet being heavily regulated in the sense. I think where I want to start off or discuss further is that it is the internet has been neutral. I've been part of the internet movement since it started, and internet has been the most neutral. It's a protocol, it's a standard, but everything on top of it has committed many sins. We've actually opened up the internet and the applications on top of it to an advertising-led model, and committed the original sin. And that advertising-led model has led to monetization of our data, and that monetization of data is what is causing and through use of AI is causing huge societal issues, and will continue to cause them if we don't put the right boundaries to it. Um, but and that's where the challenge is for people, whether it's in China or in the US or in Europe or in India, is where how do you balance between innovation and regulation, and ensure that both work hand in hand. So let me give you some more thoughts on this. Every country, every society will have its own needs. The Europe took the approach of regulating it, and India is actually taking an approach that is, in between the what is the I call the Shenzhen Valley model and the Silicon Valley model. The Silicon Valley model is the big platforms, the FANG platforms. They innovate, and there is no data regulation. They kind of suck up all the data, and they produce they produce $1 trillion companies, and they are very valuable, and actually all of us use either one of their technologies. The Shenzhen Valley model has been highly regulated. In their own countries, they are in their own country. There is a Chinese wall of a Chinese garden that they operate in, but they use that money to actually expand to global markets through investments or through partnerships or even a direct presence. And there has been concerns with that data usage, that AI usage that those platforms have done in a very very non-transparent, opaque manner. And I won't comment further on that. But the third model has emanated from India, which is the digital public goods model. What is that? Is that all first of all, data ownership lies with the citizens, the users. Two, there is a framework that the whole platform, whether it's identity, payments, is a public good. And with public goods and the democratic norms comes responsibility. And on top of it, we have an architecture called the data empowerment and protection architecture. Now, the word data empowerment and protection architecture is what is showing the balance between regulation, what you can do with it, and what you cannot do with it. So it's protecting the consumer, and but with consent, it empowers the consumer and can share data for giving the right credit, for example, right education, right skills, and everything else. And the data, the whole stack is a public good. It's an open public platform which the government uses, the businesses use, the startups use, and even the DAPA is part of that. And in that, it's what makes it open to both scrutiny as well as ensuring that there is a balance between innovation and regulation. I think we have missed the bus to to, as I said, to regulate the internet, and a lot of mistakes that we committed as a society, as a human race. While the internet was proliferating, just in the last 2 years of the pandemic, we've had more than a billion people join the internet, and quarter of them came from India. So while the growth of the connected devices of the internet has been massive, we've really not been able to control, and we should not. It was never meant to be controlled. It was supposed to be neutral. But now the platforms uh, became all these platforms, whether they came from China or from Silicon Valley. They are privately owned platforms, which have their own biases, have their own views, and they impose those views on what we watch, what we consume, and how we think. So we need a neutral approach, and as we go forward, and especially with data, because that data ensures the neutrality of algorithms and the ethical behavior of algorithms, and that's where I think we need to all work together to ensure the neutrality. The model that I have proposed and I'm talking about is a public goods model, which is where everybody can understand what's really is the who's using it and how they're using it. They are not opaque. It's a very transparent, open platform. I know, as I said, India has taken a lead in the digital public goods, but there are digital public goods from Estonia. There are digital public goods that are being developed with ITU and the European Union called GovStack, and there are a lot of approaches happening. And I think that's one of the ways that democratic, fair-minded countries need to come together to solve for this, the most pressing issue of our times, which is to ensure that AI and related technologies remain neutral, remain ethical, and remain unbiased, and actually serve the purpose of societal development rather than serving the purpose of the few who probably own the technology and try to control the world. I want to leave a few more thoughts, last thoughts that it's I talked about Moore's law, and this is another thing that I think, as regulators, as innovators, we will see a lot of agile. I've always said regulation always stays behind innovation, and this is one area that we will need to think about agile policy making, agile rule making, a broader set of rules, a broader set of principle based approach. Because if we lag a lot behind the speed by which AI is developing, the speed by which the world is growing in this whole digital economy, the Web 3.0. I think so many things will fall in the gray area in such a rapid pace that we will not have time to catch up as regulators, as policymakers. We need to think about how we can make more agile frameworks, regulation frameworks, sandboxes that can think a little futuristic and be more as innovative as the innovators are. So, you know, and that's something that all people across the world will need to think about, because this is an area that 9 months is too long. I leave my opening comments here, but thank you for having me, and it's been an exciting conversation so far.
Thank you very much, Arvind, for giving us your perspective on new technologies and how it should be or should be regulated. If you wish, I will throw different questions at you, and you will see which you would like to answer to, so that you can give really your own perspectives again, and complementary perspective more than that. So first, if I have to make connections between the different contributions, what balance should be reached between regulation and innovation? Or should regulation not be the source of better innovation, and innovation the source of better regulation? Although we should distinguish between personal data and others, are data shared commodities or the source of rights for individuals and obligations for tech companies? Or are data both, actually? New technologies have the potential to transform our lives, but shall states guide or accompany these transformations of our life? How do you see the articulation between interdependence and open sovereignty, as mentioned by Jean-Pierre Raffarin? And last but not least, we know that there is a race among countries to become leaders in the field of AI. Faced with common challenges, do you see lessons that could be taken from your own country's or region's experience and approach to regulating new technologies that could be implemented in other countries? And more generally, could the need for international tech regulation pave the way for global governance? I will let you react each to the part which is more close to your own concerns. I think there have been common topics and common issues raised in your different presentations. Who would like to start first? Maybe Wojciech, if you would like to react to Arvind's vision of what data represents for the development of our new digital lives and economy.
Thank you very much. As I said at the very beginning, one of the things which we were assured during the pandemics is the fact that we cannot build restricted and separated areas in the world as far as the data flows are concerned. While we were able to close the borders and to show the kind of sovereignty of the states for the movement of the people, while we had the opportunity to restrict or limit the movement of goods, we had absolutely no influence on the movement of data between the countries and between the regions of the world. So that drives us to the discussion about the global governance, but we should say to ourselves very openly that this is not an easy discussion, because the mere fact that somebody is signing the treaty even, or signing the declaration, or sharing theoretically the values and the ideas, does not mean that he or she is definitely cooperating with us. Unfortunately, this is the example of the Russian activities last months, last weeks, which shown us that even if Russia is a member of some of the treaties related to the fundamental rights in Europe, that's not necessarily visible in the practice. I'm absolutely aware of the fact that the legal regulations will not be fostering innovations. They are not created in order to make innovation easier, but it may the main goal is to assure that the results of the innovative activities and the implementations in the market will be trustworthy for the citizens, trustworthy for the people, trustworthy for the companies, and trustworthy for the business. So this trust is always the word that we are stressing and we are committing to. This is not the innovation for the sake of innovation. This is innovation in order to create the better world which we want to do. I'm not necessarily of the same opinion as far as the data, personal or non-personal, is concerned as a part of the infrastructure of the new society, while it is, of course, the environment in which we live in, and while we live it and we create it by each and every move in the digital world, that does not mean that it should be shared and it should be used by everyone. That's like with the use of environment, which we limit in many situations. This is also how we do with the trade. Well, I often make the connection, or rather the comparison between the development of the law of internet and the maritime law, saying that the maritime law has always been open for the people trading with each other across the borders and not taking care of the borders, using the open sea to connect. But what appeared to be normal in the beginning was later on banned, and a very good example of such situations are the slavery. So slavery was a part of the trade in the sea. Right now, we think that this is extremely against our values that we share. So we try to create the global market for data. We are trying to create the global flow of data, but not necessarily in the field where the human beings are the products and human beings are the things to be sold.
Thank you very much, Wojciech, for your input. Indeed, innovation to create a better world is of the responsibility or common concern of states. So I would like to come back to Jean-Pierre Raffarin. How do you see the articulation between interdependence, open sovereignty, and the regulation of new technologies?
It's a very difficult question. Thank you so much. The problem is that innovation is faster than regulation. I will speak French. La grande question, c'est la course entre l'innovation et la réglementation. Au fond, l'innovation va beaucoup plus vite que la réglementation, et la réglementation, elle part d'un espace géographique, mais elle a vocation à dépasser les frontières, à faire l'objet d'un accord de coopération. Je pense que l'exemple de l'Europe est assez intéressant sur ce plan de la compétition entre innovation et réglementation et entre territoires nationaux et coopération internationale. Si on regarde bien les choses, en moins de 2 ans, la Commission européenne, avec comme acteur principal Thierry Breton sur ces sujets, et avec la vice-présidente Margrethe Vestager, nous avons de très nombreux interlocuteurs qui se sont impliqués sur ces questions-là pour faire déboucher et émerger quelques consensus sur le caractère un peu difficile de ces sujets. Le Digital Market Act et le Digital Service Act ont pour ambition de faire prévaloir les règles de concurrence et de non-exclusion sur le marché des applications informatiques, afin de réagir face aux positions dominantes des grandes plateformes. Cette réflexion sur les grandes plateformes est essentielle dans la réglementation et par définition, elle est un sujet international. Dans le même esprit, un impôt minimal de 15% a été instauré dans le cadre de l'OCDE pour éviter l'évasion fiscale et maintenir l'égalité devant l'impôt, notamment en ce qui concerne ces grandes plateformes. Ainsi, le contenu fait l'objet d'une régulation précise et contraignante afin d'éviter toute diffusion en ligne de propos, de documents et de produits illicites. Ces règlements directement applicables complètent ce qu'on a appelé le Règlement général de protection des données RGPD, qui est entré en vigueur déjà en 2018. Donc la réglementation est lente, mais en Europe, elle a quand même été accélérée ces 2 dernières années. Et elle est devenue, je crois, une référence internationale significative. Mais ce que je pense, c'est qu'en matière de régulation, il faut aller plus loin dans la recherche des bons équilibres et aussi avec des discussions sur des nouveaux règlements sur les conditions du partage des données. Data Governance Act, mais des données, mais aussi des investissements dans les données, le Data Act, et avec l'Artificial Intelligence Act sur la mesure des risques présentés par les applications, par les usages de l'intelligence artificielle. On retrouve ici des multiples équilibres à trouver entre la protection des données privées que vous avez évoquées et leur utilisation commerciale pour participer à l'économie d'aujourd'hui, mais aussi naturellement de demain, et pour laquelle la donnée est la valeur, est l'indispensable. Entre les bienfaits des progrès technologiques irrésistibles, je pense notamment à la question de la santé, à l'éducation, à l'épanouissement personnel et social de leurs dérives dangereuses et nocives de surveillance et manipulation, il y a naturellement beaucoup de travail à faire. J'ai à mon poignet une montre qui est capable d'avoir un électrocardiogramme et de l'envoyer directement à mon médecin dès que j'ai une accélération cardiaque un peu pathologique. Donc tout ceci est une donnée qui circule. Je tiens à ce que ce soit relativement protégé, évidemment. Donc on voit bien la brillance de l'innovation, mais on voit bien aussi la nécessité de la réglementation. Donc il faut beaucoup de volontarisme dans les moyens matériels, avec évidemment des difficultés qui doivent être surmontées dans le respect des droits individuels, mais aussi, n'oublions pas, l'aspect économique des données privées qui est très important. Je pense qu'il y a là des priorités qui sont celles de la présidence française de l'Union européenne pour que, tout en confortant l'Europe, on cherche à contribuer à un monde numérique plus équilibré et moins dangereux. Et donc, dans cette dialectique entre la dépendance et l'interdépendance, il est clair que nous avons besoin de souveraineté, mais il n'y a pas de souveraineté intégrale, il n'y a qu'une souveraineté ouverte, une souveraineté solidaire, une souveraineté qui rend compatible la défense des intérêts, mais aussi l'exigence de coopération. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre Raffarin, for this remark. We have 5 minutes left, so I would like to give the floor to vous, Lebin, since you brought in the European example regarding the race among innovation and regulation. Vous, Lebin, would you like to conclude on the regulating efforts made by China regarding data or artificial intelligence and the key issues identified?
Yes. I think my personal points about the relationship between the innovation and the regulation. The history of science and the technology tells us the innovation move first, other things just follow. I think the innovation first, regulation just followed. And nothing can be obstacle to the innovation progress. And also, I would like to tell something about happening in China. The Chinese government already made a lot of documents or regulations about data. For example, since March 1st, 2022, the companies have to alter their AI algorithms to new regulatory standards. And also, the Cyberspace Administration of China is creating a better internet ecosystem in China. And the Personal Information Protection Law, adopted in November 2021, and the draft amendment to anti-monopoly law to manage the size and the influence of technology companies, and the Article 33 of data security law on cross-border data flows, and the ban on cryptocurrencies, and such kind of systems and regulations are already made to regulate the data and internet. I think that's a benefit for not only for the Chinese people, also for the world people.
Thank you very much, Wu. Maybe regulation comes after regulation, but maybe regulation comes after innovation, but China has been very fast in adopting a regulatory framework regarding new technologies. Thank you all for your contributions.